missing two, Mr. Martinez and maybe Dr. Filter. Okay.
Dr. Giltreth has indicated that she will not be present.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leon. So we're just expecting Ms. Spear and soon, I'm sure. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, please take notice that decisions of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County Community Oversight Board may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of cert. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the board. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. With that, we will turn to the approval of the minutes. We have both, should have first in front of you the minutes from our July 24th, 2019 meeting. It was our last board meeting here. Has everyone had an opportunity? I know that was also emailed to us, but has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes? With that, I'll accept a motion. Mr. Cooper?
I'm happy to make a motion, but I have some proposed revisions to the minutes.
Yes, sir.
So either way, if you want to have a motion and then...
Yeah, and then we can do it that way. Do I have a motion first?
I'll move.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Chairman,
Cooper.
may I make a comment as well? There were some additional changes and amendments made to the minutes by Board Member Sweeney that did not get incorporated earlier today.
Okay.
Printing was already done.
I'll mention them too.
He'll mention
I
them.
suspect we may have some of the same list.
Yep.
Okay, so let's keep in mind with that, Mr. Cooper's made the motion. Do I have someone second it, please?
Second.
Yeah. there's,
Mr. Sweeney, okay, any focused discussion? Sounds like we'll start with Mr. Cooper.
Looking at page 1, the last item on the first page, Executive Committee meeting report, that appears to be carried over from the previous minutes, and I would suggest that that be struck from these minutes. On the next page, page 2, the second paragraph under committee update, Kathy Morante should be spelled with a K, A-T-H-Y, and Morante is M-O-R-A-N-T-E. The next paragraph, we should read, Matt Sweeney pointed out some items in the draft rules to take note of. On the next page, under Metro Public Health Department MOU, it's a reference to, in the second line, former councilman, Mr. Dickerson. I assume that should be Metro Legal Attorney, Mr. Dickerson. And then in the next to last line of that paragraph, amendment citing the statute should be statute. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes. On the first page under approval of minutes, where it makes reference to the July meeting minutes were approved, I think that should be June meeting.
Good catch.
And then under chair remarks, where it says COB media policy reinstating, I presume that's restating.
Restate.
And then over on the second page, under the committee update and such, I had a number of suggestions, comments that I've already given to Ms. Person, and those are going to get changed in there. They're just clarification, they're not substantive. It's easier for her just to take them than it would be to go through them.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we have a motion to approve the minutes with the, Mr. Holloway.
Make a motion to accept the minute with necessary correction.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway.
I second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell-Gooch. Any focused discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay. Abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Oops, sorry.
Yep.
Reopen the
The wordsmith.
Well, either I have another amendment or I need to have a name change. Or maybe Ashley
yes,
does.
of course, yes.
On the third page, under the NAPOL annual conference, she and I seem to have been conflated.
What a compliment that is. For me. I actually I don't have a problem with that.
So I guess I did that.
You vote no on this?
I think that should be a Del Lewis, not a Del
Yeah, I think it's
Davis.
not, yeah. So there was a motion to reopen, Mr.
Sorry
Cooper?
about that.
No, it's very helpful. Mr. Cooper, I think you made a motion.
Motion to reopen to make the revision suggested by Ms. Lewis.
Mm-hmm. Anyone second?
Second.
Is that Mr. Sweeney? Okay. Folks, discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Abstentions? Thank you very much. Thank you. And also, thank you to Ms. Park. Thank you for all that you have to consume from us. 11 different personalities that you have to bring into one body. So God bless you. Thank you.
Having done this myself, I know how difficult it is, so I appreciate very much.
It is trying.
doing here.
And anytime you can make me a medical doctor, please do it. So thank you. I appreciate it. So the next thing is quickly, could we pass these out? Do you mind, Mr. Cooper?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So there is, just very briefly to share with you all, we have the minutes from the last executive committee meeting. I just got this myself, but it is unapproved. It's important to share here. We can certainly wait and approve them later, but we didn't want to get it into the hands of everyone. Here, there hasn't been an executive committee meeting this month, so that's the last one, the month of July, that you have in front of you here. And good thing to know is that there's nothing there that's noted that we did not talk about in the last board meeting as well, right? So everything around the COB media policy, the talk about having open forum for public comment here as well is all listed there. So what likely, first of all, needs to happen is that the next meeting of the executive committee, there would be a review and approval of the minutes. Mr. Cooper, tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Campbell Gooch as well.
That's correct.
And then we'll bring it back here. But just to ensure everyone's fully aware, I wanted to get this in the hands of everyone. And I appreciate Mr. Cooper bringing it to the floor here. So nothing more to do on that. I do want to pause for a moment and just clarify. Mr. Whedon, I sent you an email literally as I was coming from work here. But do we have a sheet of some sort, something so that the public can sign up, or can we circulate something now if there are those that might want to participate in the public comment?
I think we may have, we had a meeting yesterday. I think we still have some sheets from yesterday.
Okay, great. Okay.
Make available.
And that's not until the, latter part, towards the very end of the meeting, so we certainly have time, but just in the interest of fairness, if we could circulate it for those that are here that might be interested in speaking. And we have our backs to people, but if y'all want to move this way, that'd be...
I think that's all staff back there, except for Dr.
I know, I just feel bad.
Dr. Rubin.
Yeah.
We did that yesterday. It's uncomfortable.
We welcome you if you want to come this way. The good thing is also you don't have to be on camera either. But it's okay. We'll make sure we still turn. I hate having my back to folks sometimes. So, but if you all are not offended, we are not. And so we'll keep moving here. But we will ensure that we circulate the paper, and those that are interested can participate. Next, I want to move to, I usually have chair remarks here. I don't have any remarks other than I should say this. I appreciate all of the work that's been taking place behind the scenes. Mr. Sweeney, we appreciate the emails from you and others that have been working to ensure that we're ready for this meeting as it relates not only to the bylaws but also the public meetings and comments that have taken place. So thank you also to the media. Those who are working on the media policy, the Facebook page, wonderful. I did add myself. Everyone should do the same, right? And I appreciate the great news that's going up from our staff, led by Mr. Whedon. That's fantastic. And let's just continue the momentum. It's fantastic. I will then move to number 4, the fine fees and technical assistance. Mr. Holloway, we're very happy to welcome you back. We just wanted to pause and give you a moment to share anything that you might want to share from those meetings that you have attended in the past.
Well, we hadn't had a meeting since June, and a report was given on that.
Okay.
So the next meeting will be in September, and then they're going to do the final report from their analyses of different departments in metro government in October.
Okay.
That's all we have.
Gotcha. So in the meeting in June, could you just give us an overview? What was the discussion like there?
Well, what they have an committee that's going around to analyze the different departments that's collecting money for fees and fines, and the example they gave was San Francisco City, what they have used, because a lot of the people that have been incarcerated, for misdemeanors or felonies, and people, due to the fact that lower income people are not able to make the bond, so therefore we got to take care of them. We got to feed them. We got to make sure they have, and they also talk about money being spent on, whatever fine they're given, they're not able to pay it. Sometimes the fees are waived and sometimes they're not. So if they're not, never been paid, they turn into a warrant. So what they have to do is have to find out where they are in service. So you got to hire people, sheriff people, police department who have to serve warrants. So that costs money. So they're trying to figure out a way to eliminate the additional expenses that cost and can save people money. And like I was explaining to them, we had some people that were being charged for a small traffic violation, but due to the fact of being unemployed or low income, the fees continue to escalate, and realize that they owe thousands of dollars. So I gave an example of one of the judges that had one in her court, and she asked the man how much money he had in his pocket. He said $500. She said, well, how'd you get here? And he had a friend that brought him to work. She said, well, I tell you what, I'm going to charge you $490, and you get the man $10 to take you back home, so we're going to resolve this, So he's been tied up with this case for long because he was unemployed, couldn't afford to pay it. So these non-violent crimes, they're trying to find a solution. You got people housed that can't get out, you got to feed them, and you got to provide board for them, and so there got to be a way to eliminate that. And also they were talking about some special schools that some of the people could go to try to eliminate whatever they've been charged for in court and help and get it resolved. They go to like safe driving school. Go to a safe driving school, then you can get your license taken care of, instead of being driving around with both license. People gonna drive, they're gonna go to work. Criminals gonna drive also, and so they are trying to figure out through each department how much money being spent, how much money being used to take care of being staffed, because with things increasing each year with a large number of people being arrested, a large number of people being cited, you got to increase your staff to be able to handle the workload. And so if they can find a way to try to eliminate some of these fees and fines and stuff, then maybe they won't need to increase their staff. You've got to hire somebody year round and cost them $40,000, $50,000, if not more. So once they do the analyzation of each department, then they're gonna figure out what recommendations they're gonna take to try to improve the system.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Is there just one question, and I'll open it up if other members of the board have questions. Is there an opportunity for the community to offer their insight or input, or is that a part of the plan at all? Did they speak about that at all?
Well, yeah, they had, at the second meeting that was there, they had people from the community there. And,
Okay.
they were able to ask questions. Matter of fact, we had one that had a criminal background, and he was asking different type of things, what he had to go through to get himself straight.
Great.
And so this make it difficult for people to, if you can't pay your fine, then you turn to a warrant, then they got to try to find out where you're located, and then arrest you, then the process start all over again. But we can make it this much easier for a person. You got a felony record. You need a job to pay the bill. And it's amazing. I had an experience with a person that I knew from the last couple of years. trying to find a place to live, and on the application, it had something about had to be arrested for felony arrest, and they couldn't get no apartment. Well, they got to live somewhere, you know, so everybody got to work together to try to
Yes, sir.
solve this community and staff.
Yeah.
They are doing metro fines, state fees. They're not. The state, the felony, they're not dealing with that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Any other questions from the board? If not, thank you. We'll look, depending on the timing, for a report from you in the September board meeting or perhaps in October. So if it's after our board meeting, if that makes sense. I don't know when the exact date, but you said the next meeting in September?
In September.
Okay,
And the final process will be in October.
in October.
So you want to report September or you want?
Well, we'd at least like you're doing today, just an overview for the board of the general like outcomes of the meeting. If perhaps there's a meeting agenda, I think it would just be helpful for those of us that are not able to be in the room. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. That would be great. Okay, then we'll move on to the COB media policy update. I'm open. I'm not sure exactly who should lead that, so that's why I didn't put a name there. So I'm looking around the corners here. Who is involved?
So I volunteered to be part of it, but I was never contacted. I just assumed that I would be contacted once the community liaison started, so I'm not sure if there's been any update on that.
Great. So let me pause. Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Very good point. And that's so two parts. I think, Mr. Wheaton, and maybe perhaps this is in your chair and your executive updates, but I know that there's certainly the Facebook policy we now have, of course. In addition to the staff that's leading that effort too. Do you want to hold until you get to your comments to talk a bit about that, or would you like to share an update now?
I can hold that.
Okay,
Yeah.
and wait for that. Okay, then we'll move forward there, and then in between that time, Mr. Whedon, if we could just ensure that, I believe it was both Mr. Campbell-Gooch and Mr. Martinez, am I right about that? That were designated to lead our efforts there in the media policy. If we could just ensure that they're convened to meet with the members of your staff that you think you deem appropriate, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And actually, you're next up at bat, Mr. Whedon. So we will yield the floor to you.
Thank you. We've been making slow but steady progress as a team. First of all, as you see in the handout that I provided to the board, personnel issues, we recently hired Brenzy Thompson, who is our community liaison. Ms. Thompson started on the 5th of August. And in addition to Ms. Thompson, that next week we were able to hire our lead research analyst, Dr. Peter Belier. Dr. Belier is seated in the back here in the blue shirt with the beard. He joins us.
It's my first time. Nice to meet you, Ms. Thompson.
Brenzy was here. Oh, you weren't here last meeting. I'm sorry.
No.
Brenzy is right there. She's in the black and white dress there in the middle.
Nice
So
to meet
we
you
are
both.
welcoming both Dr. Belier and Brenzy. And as a matter of fact, our last hire will be Miss Liz Orozco, who will be a research analyst and will be joining us after the Labor Day. And with that, we will have a full and complete staff. So we are looking forward to that. In addition, recent case activity from our end, we received since we've begun, we've received about 15 inquiries for services from the organization, and 3 of those matters are currently being investigated as allegations of police misconduct. 2 of those matters, 2 other matters that we received are open for policy review. 3 matters that we received of those 15 were referred out. They were out of our jurisdiction, but they were referred to the proper agency for services. And 5 of the matters that our office received by inquiry were past the April 1st start date of our jurisdiction. So they were outside of that date, and therefore we were not able to take those matters in. One of the matters did not involve any misconduct. It was a matter of just a concern, a citizen's concern that we were able to address. And the last matter did not involve a Metro police officer. It was undetermined whether that person that allegedly performed the conduct or misconduct was even a member of Metro Police Department. We weren't able to make that determination. So, and in addition, I should state that we want to thank our community liaison, Ms. Frenzy Thompson. She has put together a very successful Facebook page. I think we're up to about 150, 160 likes on the Facebook page so far. She's just got up and running with her Twitter page, and we look forward to making more posts on Twitter, keeping people informed about our activities and meetings and things of that nature. And I think with the addition of the social media and the fact that we now have in place our website for the staff members, in addition to the website for the board, complete with we have a online complaint form on the staff website, in addition to the 24-hour hotline number to make a complaint. In the past week, I think we've received 4 inquiries from the public in the past week. So there is an uptick in the activity. We even received 1 walk-in inquiry during this week, so I think that is a good indicator that we're making some progress. And we look forward to making more now that we have our community liaison in place. Let's see. Office space is the next topic to discuss. We continue to make good progress with the office space. The lease has passed committee, and the build-out is expected to begin very soon. I expect the build-out to begin within the month of September, possibly within the first 2 weeks of September. So we anticipate possibly being in the permanent space by hopefully before Thanksgiving, well before Thanksgiving. As far as the office equipment goes, most of our hardware, I should say all of our hardware is in place now, or at least most of it is in place. What we're working on now is software. Our most important software that we need is case management software. We've been in discussion with ITS about the requirements for the case management software IA Pro. IA Pro is, of course, it's a police software, but it's used mostly by internal affairs. They have a modified version that civilian oversight agencies use. Several civilian oversight agencies use IA Pro, including Atlanta. I spoke with Atlanta this week about their use of IA Pro. However, there's several technical requirements that must be met up to ITS standards, and we're trying to work that out right now. But hopefully we can get that software installed very soon as the uptick in cases continues. And we are also discussing with Westlaw about the locator service Clear, which will help us track down witnesses or individuals who don't necessarily want to be found. The Clear system helps you to locate those individuals. So there's another important piece of software that we need. Internal projects that we're working on currently. We have the mediation program that our legal advisor, Todd Pinckney, has been working on. He will give a presentation on that after my presentation. He'll fill you in more about that, but Todd has made tremendous strides in getting a good, solid draft of that ready, and he'll speak more about that after I finish. Todd has also completed a internal standard operating procedure manual for our office that we've got a first draft of. It looks pretty good. We are continuing to review that, and we should have that ready by the next month for our internal use. That's the internal standard operating procedure. Our assistant director is working on an employee handbook, Ms. Pritchard. She's drafting that, and she continues to draft that item. She's not here today, unfortunately. She had a family emergency that she got called out on just about an hour ago. But she continues to work on the employee handbook, human resources handbook for the employees. We also have some internal memorandums of understanding that the legal advisor has been working on. We have the one completed with the Animal Care and Control Unit. Tom continues to work on the MOU with the Medical Examiner's Office and public schools, in addition to several other metro agencies. So we look forward to completing that as well. As I mentioned earlier, we have the website for the staff that is currently up and running. It's been up and running about 2 weeks now, I think. The Facebook page has been available for about a week or a week and a half, and as I said, the Twitter account was just launched today. We look for more activity from all of those two social media websites. Training, the investigators, you have several handouts in regards to training. The investigators completed an online training that was sponsored by NACO. It was a live webinar on August 8th that concerned cognitive interviewing techniques. It was about an hour-long training course. The investigators completed that. The investigators also are currently involved in Metro Police Department's recruit training. This is the second week of their training as we speak now. They've been to 6 classes so far. The training schedule for the investigators is quite lengthy. I think it goes from August all the way till about February. So there's quite a few classes that they're going to attend. Most of these classes are recruit training classes. Some are recurrent training. They are not 8 hours a day. Some of them are a couple of hours. Some are more, but they're scheduled over the course of about 4 or 5 months there. The investigators continue to do that. Additionally, we have been working with the Chicago Police Department. We want to bring to Nashville the concept of procedural justice and police legitimacy that is currently being, spearheaded mainly by the Chicago Police Department. They have been training other police agencies across the country on that concept. That is it's a concept that grew out of the President's 21st Century Task Force. It's a new policing idea that's being implemented across the country. And we've been in contact with the Deputy Chief up in Chicago, Dana Alexander, and the Deputy Chief of Training, Kevin Johnson. They've indicated that they would be happy to bring 2 of their training officers down to Nashville to present that program to the public. Been in contact with them about that, and also in contact with the Director of the Department of Metro Human Rights. They're also doing a program on the concept of procedural justice. So we're going to open that up to the general public to attend that training program, in addition to law enforcement officers that may want to attend and learn about how procedural justice and police legitimacy can help improve the police and community relationship here in Nashville. Lastly, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there's currently some situations going on in Knoxville. And I did reach out to our colleague in Knoxville, their director, Clarence Vaughn, about that situation, and made it known to him that if we could help in any way, I don't know how we can, but if we can help in any way with his situation there, that we'd be willing to do that. And with that, I think that would be the end of my presentation about what we've been doing.
Thank you, Mr. Wheaton. Appreciate it. I'll open up to the board if there are any questions or comments. Mr. Martinez.
Is there, based on the cases that you have now, do you have a timeline to finish those investigations, or is it too preliminary?
2 of those cases have gone, are approaching the timeline. We've given them a 30-day extension, so that's because we have not received the records that are required, that we would like to have to make a proper investigation. So we continue to wait on those records, but that's been the hold up with those 2 cases. The 3rd case we just received this week, so that's a fresh case.
Okay.
Mr. Wheaton, are we waiting for a Metro Department? Who exactly, who are you waiting for?
We are waiting for records, police records to to come in. We've made requests for police records, but they have not come in yet. So we continue to wait on those records, and it appears to be the holdup. We don't have the immediate access to police records or timely access at this point that we would like to have. So that's slowing our investigation down a bit. We could do an investigation without police records, but I don't think it would be proper. I think we need as much information as we can to make a thorough and fair assessment of the situation. And until we get those police records, it's going to be difficult. So we're waiting, but we want to do things in a timely manner, and we'd like to receive those records as soon as possible.
Right. So is the line of communication open? Are they communicating, hey, we need a week, 2 weeks, or is it, radio silence, I guess?
There is communication. I think Ms. Pritchard is not here. She is more hands-on with the day-to-day status of the investigations. She was, as I said, she was supposed to be here today. She was giving a presentation about the training as well, but she was called out. But as I understand, we've made our requests, but those records have just not come in yet, and I don't know exactly when they may come in. Hopefully, if I get more information about that from Ms. Richard, we'll definitely fill the board in. But that is the cause of the delay right now.
Okay, so, and I recognize Mr. Holloway, I see Ms. Ross and Mr. Campagouche. Just one last thing here. So I understand if we can't get an answer on this before tonight, I mean, I understand family emergency happened, but at least before the end of the week, it would be good to understand just the timeline of this request. As the board, I think it's incumbent upon us, it's our responsibility to the community as well, to do all that we can to be very vocal about the relationships that exist and how we're trying to work together. So where we can be supportive of your efforts, we want to be, both individually and otherwise. And so please let us know. I'd like just quick email, and not just to myself as the chair, but I think as the board, we should be aware of it. And I do not want to wait. We're not going to wait until September to assist you in finding a resolution here, if whatever that case may be. I don't know the order, so I'm going to go order of space. Okay, I'll follow my colleagues here, Mr. Holloway, Ms. Ross, and then Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Number one, you're not going to expect to have open communication right away. It's a new process with the police department. We're going to have a new mayor. We need to deal with a new mayor to develop a relationship, because his opinion might be different from the one that we have right now.
They're not tough.
No doubt about that.
So, Mr. Holloway, I have to cut you off just in the spirit of democracy and what we can't see into the future. We have no idea who our mayor will be. We may very well have our current mayor, and everyone should go out to vote. I should say early voting is open, but I take your point. I just want to make it's important that we state that approach. Yeah, I hear you.
Absolutely.
Another thing, I don't know the case you're working on, but there's one that was shown on TV where the police resigned, where mishandled this lady. I know the attorney. He asked me to talk with you, see if you want to interview this client. So we can talk later if you want to.
So, Mr. Holloway, I appreciate you mentioning it, but let me just say here, back to our bylaws, the appropriateness of our how we communicate. Any requests you get, any of us that we get like that, we should immediately step back from it, have no involvement, no communication whatsoever, and all we do is point them to the staff, Mr. Wheaton. And so I would even encourage you to do no more than tonight to forward that directly to Mr. Wheaton. I wouldn't even communicate to that person at all, because what you don't want to do is be unable to say that you're impartial, that you haven't been involved in that. And then I welcome your response.
I understand that very clearly.
Yes, sir.
I was a police officer for 35 years. I
Yes, sir.
understand that very clearly. And I made that very clear to you.
Yes, sir.
But he just saw me, and he knew what kind of work that I do. And he knows I'm on his board. And I told him that I could not
Yes, sir.
do it. And he said, if the board wanted to, he could do that.
Right.
And that's all I'm just relating.
You know, I understand. I worry that he shouldn't have come. Their communication, the website is up. There's about now almost 20 different ways to get in touch with our staff. And so any good lawyer knows that you do your due diligence and you figure out, get that way,
Let me just
Mr.
say
Weaver.
this. I've spoken with the young lady's attorney on a couple of occasions. I don't know
Good.
when you had a conversation with him, but he did make that offer to us, so there were other things that came up, other agencies involved that kind of prevented us from having that conversation. But we'll reach out to him again.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Ross?
I just wanted to know how long ago was the request made from the police department, and as a result of the MOU that, are they waiting on that to be completed in terms of their response?
The requests were made at least, I would say, maybe about a month ago or so. I would think. A couple of times, yes.
A couple of times.
Yeah.
So are they waiting on the MOU to be completed or presented to them? Do you know?
Well, one of the drawbacks is that there are two websites or two directions that a request can go public. This is sort of a public request that fortunately we can caught up in. There is an address that you send for a public request, and there's an address that is sent for a law enforcement agency request for what's considered a law enforcement agency that gets a more rapid response. We received, as you saw from the new directive from the chief of police, gave the email address for records requests to go to the public request site. That delays us tremendously because it is a public request, not a law enforcement request.
Gotcha. That takes all day.
If our request was to go to the quote law enforcement request line, it would be received much quicker and acted upon much quicker. So that's the holdup, or one of the holdups.
So which way did you send them, both ways or just one way?
Did we send those both ways?
Yeah, so he attempted to send it to the law enforcement, I'm talking about Henry, lead investigator. Attempted to send it through the law enforcement for Metro line, because Metro and other law enforcement and other Metro agencies just to put line, but it was returned to him and said that he had to go through the public.
Okay. Could, Mr. Kim, Ms. Ross, anything? Do you have a follow-up?
I'm just wondering, in our MOU, did we really address that now?
Yeah.
Well, let me say that we
We got a section in it.
we had a meeting with the chief of police because the chief of police sent us a memorandum, or not a memorandum, but his new directive to his officers. We met with the chief about that because we had some issues about that. One of the issues that we wanted to address was the records request, and we requested that method of requesting the records be changed from the public access line to the police access line or law enforcement access line. That request was denied by the chief of police. He said that he didn't feel that it wasn't necessary for us basically to go through the law enforcement request line, that it was more proper to go through the public request email line. And that was his response to us. And so we did not consider our request to have our records request go through the law enforcement email address.
As far as we know, is this customary? And maybe I'm happy to receive, like, if you need time to go out and look at this. This strikes me is causing something. It's causing the tortoise effect to something that's unnecessary, right? And to be very just frank, this is not your office is not everyday entity engaging and requesting materials, and that's proof by the fact that we are working on, MOUs with other segments of metro government. What I would appreciate, and I know that we're going through we have a bit of a phase of change here in our own respect, but I'd appreciate an opportunity for you to have the support of the chair, and maybe perhaps another member. I know we have to think about the sunshine line, but maybe it's just the chair. But I would like to reopen that discussion, and reopen it in a way where, one, we need to have if that's the position, then we need to make sure that is publicly stated, because, and I mean that they state that the chief states that, because the community needs to understand that, right? They are coming to us assuming that when they file, with your office, that you have all the tools in your arsenal to go forth and look for the necessary information. That's just not happening right now. And I'd at least like to understand the rationale. I'm sure other members of the board also would like to at least understand it, because we don't want to presume anything. I'm open to other ideas on that too, especially from those of you that have not had an opportunity to speak here. One moment, Mr. Holloway here. I see you, but I understand that I spoke in front of Mr. Campbell-Gooch, so let me pause there, Mr. Campbell-Gooch, and I'll come back to Mr. Holloway.
Yeah, and my questions were pretty much on the same line as the two that were just asked. So I have like a couple of clarifying questions for you, Mr. Whedon, and I don't know if you can answer them, but they're like technical questions. Do you know what the software is that Metro uses?
Metro uses IE Pro as well, I believe.
Okay.
That is one of the reasons, because we can, there's a possibility we can share information.
Right. And so has there been any conversation about allowing the Community Oversight Board staff to have access to that in order to alleviate the tortoise effect that
we haven't gotten to that point yet. We're still working with, we haven't gotten IE Pro yet, so we're still working with IT to gain access to IE Pro just for our purposes. And then once we get IE Pro, of course, we would talk with Metro about sharing documentation through that method.
And I know we're kind of late to the party when it comes to civilian oversight. Is that do other civilian oversight sites, is that a norm, having the access to the same records as police and being trained on the same software?
Well, I'm only been a part of one other agency. I can tell you that in the agency that I've been a part of in Chicago, that we share the same database. You get records immediately. Immediately, as soon as they're uploaded, they will become available to the Civilian Oversight Agency in Chicago. So I can only speak to that agency. That's the only one I've ever worked for. But that was a norm there.
And so in Chicago, were the records, was that a two-way street that once you received a complaint, were they notified and things of that nature? Were the information going both ways?
Well, information wasn't going both ways. We didn't share. It was a one-way sharing of information. We were able to get information from the police. Of course, we did not share our information with the police because of the nature of our investigation. So we took a statement from a witness or a complainant, and we uploaded it to our system. It wasn't shared with the police department, but what we needed from the police department, we could receive from them through that software they had in place.
Okay. That was all I had.
Okay. I have, Mr. Holloway.
Okay, you said public stated. Now, what does that mean? Do we do a press conference?
No.
TV? Do we do
No.
a news media? Or do we call for a meeting and invite them in? What does that mean?
That means, no, I don't have any of that in mind. Actually, I think after this meeting, if their position is still what it is, we at least ask for it in writing, right? So that we can share it out. The public has no way of understanding why it is that our Metro Police has decided to go a different route than perhaps, as we're understanding, other police have done differently. We just need an understanding on where we stand as we try to work through this. So, but no, I don't see any need for a press conference. I don't know about
What
anyone else.
happens if you don't get it in writing?
If we don't get it in writing,
Yes.
then we do nothing more. We have no other recourse in mind thing but to come back to this space and make sure we're articulating it again. And I think, again, we come back as a board and decide what it is that we want to do in this space. I'll be very frank with Mr. Holloway. I don't know the end of this story. I do know that at the center of it, though, is something needs to be done. And so I'm willing to work backwards here if that's what it takes. But, yeah.
One thing we probably could do is check with Knoxville Oversight Board,
Mm-hmm.
Memphis
probably
Oversight
is
Board,
the same.
and
Yeah.
check with them, see what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they'll give us some ideas and see what we need to do.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Ms. Ross, and then Mr.
Okay,
Sweeney.
for clarifications, we are talking about obtaining records from, okay, and according to their, and I think we all received this,
Yep, MOU.
Police Department Declaration of Cooperation. It states that we are to request materials through public records.
Mm-hmm. And that's
That's the direction that the police have for their department.
Right. So, and that's what the second attempt was. Like, the first attempt was higher than the
Right.
second one was this. And then the ending result is that you've gotten no response at all. Am I right about that?
But they only asked us to do it that way. Now, why they're not responding?
Is the
And
question at hand.
We may not have a time frame according to, we don't have our memorandum of agreement completed with them. So I think some of that will come in terms of time frames once we present this to the police chief.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully.
We hope. I thank you, Ms. Ross. Mr. Sweeney.
Just for point of information, in the draft memorandum of understanding proposal, we break information requests into 3 different categories. With certain information that we're supposed to get immediately, others that we get under certain circumstances, and third that we can make a request for. And of course, we'll have to see how that gets negotiated, but that is the goal, that there is certain information that we should always have access to the data at the same time that it's uploaded at the police department. And then there's others that we can recognize that we can get in different ways, according to our proposal.
Can someone just remind me, and apologies if I'm behind here, but aren't we currently in the negotiation? We're in discussion or no? Or is it in the public comment space, Mr. Sweeney? And
We
then
just had the public comments yesterday.
yesterday, last night. Okay.
And we'll talk about that a bit more. There's still going to have to be some further public comment. And then our committee is going to be meeting later on this month, and then we will hopefully present a final proposal to the board at our next meeting,
Okay.
which it will then authorize us to negotiate from.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Chief Turner?
Oh, I think Mr. Sweeney answered my question. I was going to ask if the request for records or information was included in the MOU that we're currently drafting. So he answered my question.
Thank you, Chief Turner. Mr. Martinez?
Do we know if Metro publishes like an average time it takes them to respond to open records requests from the public?
Don't know about that. Dr. Verleer may have more. Dr. Verleer, do you have an answer to that?
I could not hear your question.
Do we know if Metro has an average time to responding to open records requests from the public?
There's a legal time frame that they have. They have 5 days to respond to the initial request, and I believe, and then after that they have another set amount of time, which I believe is 14 days, 10 to 14 days, to respond to either provide records or provide
Reason for
a
denial.
justification of why it would take longer.
And have they blown through that?
Well, we've gone past that, yes.
Yeah. So, okay, and then the other question I had is, I heard that it's not just a law enforcement agency line; it's a Metro agency line.
It's well, there are 2 websites that you can direct requests to. One is a public information request. The other is sort of a law enforcement agency request line.
Okay, so it's not it's just law enforcement agencies. It's not any Metro agency.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Cooper?
Follow up on Mr. Martinez's questions, because I was wondering the same thing. I'm assuming then the data that we are seeking is something that would qualify as a public record, since that's what they're directing us to do, submit it through the public record request portal. Statute there, first of all, the Public Records Act says that they have to respond promptly. Secondly, they have 7 business days within which to provide a maximum of 7 days, business days within which to provide either the records or a statement of how long it will take them to pull the records together if it is more than that amount of time. However, they can't just automatically take that 7 days and then give you a letter and say it's going to be some more if in fact they can provide it earlier. And then if they don't respond, then the requesting party has a legal remedy and can seek to have a court compel, and if there's not a basis on which to have denied the records, can seek attorney's fees. That's obviously a little awkward here since we're talking about 2 metro agencies, but to Mr. Martinez's point, those deadlines are clearly set out in the statute, and agencies that go past them are routinely sanctioned by the court.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Dr. Lewis?
So that's my question too. Is going through this portal equivalent to the FOIA process, or is that a second recourse for us to use? Do a formal Freedom of Information Act request?
I mean, I would like to think that we ultimately don't have to go through that we will have a relationship where there will be a free exchange of data. But if at this point they are treating us as in the other public records requests, they at least have to follow the Public Records Act's deadlines.
Mr. Campbell Gooch?
I mean, Mr. Sweeney was next.
Mr. Sweeney.
I'll follow up after Mr. Sweeney.
Has there been any written response at all to the requests?
There has been written responses. Mr. Ramirez, Investigator Ramirez, he's not here presently. He has those responses. I don't know, Vernon, are you aware of what the responses were?
I'm not.
He has received some responses, but he has not received, the responses that he's received have not been the records. That
Right. Have they been substantive, or have they said we need more time, or these are confidential, they're not public records, we're not going to give them to you? What have they said?
I don't know the nature of that, those responses. Ms. Pitcher would be able to answer that better. She's not here today. I can get that to you. I can get that information for you.
Right. Yeah, I request that we be provided with that so that we have an understanding, because I presume that this is going to be the first in a series until we get this resolved. And so, and as far as the public records part goes, to make the request through the public portal, one of the complications of that is that they're probably going to say whatever records that we're asking for are confidential.
Mm-hmm.
Now, under the new statute, that doesn't make any difference, because we can get confidential documents and then we have to hold them confidential.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're going to say, you're covered by the same public requirements and therefore you don't meet the public requirements because these are confidential, we're not going to give you anything, then, we're just playing rope-a-dope.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I do think that this is something that needs to be aggressively attended to in order to figure out a means before there's an MOU, because I presume when we go through the MOU negotiation process, that as a practical matter, that's going to take a couple months before there's an agreement as to the MOU. So there needs to be an interim fix to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and to bring the appropriate negotiation and or other types of pressure to bear in order to get it to work.
Yeah, Tom.
I've seen one of the responses from Metro, and what they said was that the documents requested by Mr. Ramirez were confidential based on that Tennessee and Metro case.
And therefore won't be produced? And therefore won't be produced to us?
Mr. Ramirez did
This is
inform
the-
them of the directive from the chief and about the statute. I'm not sure that they've responded to that.
Is it a criminal case?
That's what they cited. They cited the, I think it's Rule 16 of the criminal procedure, that the documents were confidential under that rule. And then they cited a Supreme Court case that said that under that rule, documents don't have to be released.
And did we issue a response?
I'm not 100% sure on that. Mr. Ramirez did send them I believe he sent them an email instructing them about the directive from the chief and as far as the statute requiring us to maintain confidentiality. I'm not sure that he has received a response about that.
Let me pause and I'll yield to my colleagues here, Mr. Campbell Gooch and Mr. Holloway.
And I'm trying to choose my words like very carefully. But the level of frustration that I'm feeling at this point in time is overwhelming. Okay. And my brother's behind me, and like being one of the people who were in the room at the beginning before this was even a thing and getting that pushback. This is not surprising. So anytime we have anything of this nature that is happening, where people who should be engaging are not engaging, we have to be as transparent as possible about that. Because we could have been working towards a solution as far as the people on the ground that got this here before this point. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody else, but I got a lot of skin in this game. And I feel like a lot of these 15 cases that we have, I literally sent them to the board. So at this point, if I can get names on who we need to be following up with, the timeline of the request, who denied the request, who we've been corresponding to this point to, as much information and detail as I possibly can, because the people on the ground fought for this and I was beside them, so we got to get this done. And I don't know if that's productive to this conversation or moving anything forward. But I just need the people on this board and in this room to know that if they get any type of pushback in any type of way from anybody who should be participating and open and honest in this situation, please let me know. Because the people who have fought for this, bled for this, died for this, are in this room even though they're not present. And this board has to be reflective of the community at all times. And having people that should be honest and who claim to be public servants not fully participating in the way that promotes this board and the transparency that we're trying to promote need to be held accountable for those things in real time.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell Gooch. I just want to call out in order our board members, Mr. Holloway, Mr. Cooper, and then Mr. Sweeney. And then I'll call on myself here, but I just want to respect those that turned around in that order. Mr. Holloway, Mr. Campbell Gooch will come. We will acknowledge and have a path forward here. I agree with you, Mr. Holloway.
This is not a surprise to me. I don't know about you. I've dealt with this 35 years.
Yes.
And hope you realize that if they want us to spin wheels, that's what they want us to do. And they will provide some information to you, but it may be to a point where they may have to get a court order to get certain documents. It depends on the case and depends on what phase it is. But we can't give up. We represent the people in the community, and we need to go forward with whatever we need to do.
Yes, sir. Mr. Cooper.
Based on the report that Mr. Binkley gave us about the substance of the written response that we received, it sounds like at least at a minimum we're going to need to address what appears to be differing legal interpretations of this board's authority to review this information. And so perhaps one path we can take, certainly not the only path, is to have Mr. Binkley consult with Mr. Dickerson and Metro Legal about what Metro Legal's interpretation is of the application of the Rule 16 exemption from the Public Records Act that the police department has cited as it applies to requests from our board, given the statutory authority we have to maintain confidentiality of records. And if Metro Legal adopts the same interpretation that we think applies here, that may go a long way toward facilitating the quick review of these documents.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. I know that we're directly taking notes there. I do want us to come back, especially if there's a motion in favor of Mr. Cooper's recommendation there. Or perhaps, Mr. Whedon, if you're saying that you agree with this and you're simply going to move forward, perhaps we don't need a board vote there. But it seems like as a board there is a somewhat general sentiment here that we do want to direct some movement forward. But I'll pause there. I know it's Mr. Sweeney's turn to speak. So,
following up on what Mr. Kembaguchi said, this is the type of issue that the board needs to know about when it occurs. And this is a matter that the director needs to know about rather than just have it being handled at a lower level. So when there's pushback as to what we need for us to work, that needs to come up to you, Mr. Whedon. And you need to know the details on it, and you need to have a recommendation or a proposal or whatever as to how to address it. And the board needs, in your reports and interim if necessary, the board needs to know when something is happening that's impeding your ability to do your work, so that we can then figure out if we need to address it in the interim or we need to address it at a board meeting. But this is not a matter that should just come out through discussion like it did today. This is a matter that should have been at the top of your report that says, we have an issue. We're not getting what we need to get in order to work. And it's because it's not being produced to us when we're making an appropriate request. That's the type of thing that is really, really important to your responsibility and to our responsibility. And I ask that you elevate that up and make sure that that's something that's on your radar rather than just the radar of your staff.
Absolutely. Understood. We just had this meeting with the chief yesterday. This just came up yesterday. It was brought up today. But yes, I absolutely agree.
Miss, let me just pause here. Yeah, no, just two things. One, I just don't want us to get lost in there's follow-up. There's certainly the follow-up of wanting to know, we want the substantive, we want to know exactly what was the response. And in fact, like forwarded, not
And the timeline.
no paraphrase, the timeline, absolutely. And if there's any additional, like things that we don't know, don't know, you don't know. We don't know to ask kind of thing. Please give us as full of a picture as possible so that we can understand exactly what the back and forth from Mr. Ramirez, Mrs. Fitchard, anyone else, even yourself and others, we need to understand that I take Mr. Cooper's point. I do think, without a doubt, very quickly we need to move forward with engaging Mr. Dickerson in that space to understand what is the legal's under interpretation. We are right now meeting on a monthly basis. However, it's not following on me that every month I've been asking, or it's been in this report, where we are in each one of our investigations, and we've been told, hey, still in process. But if in process means that, to Mr. Sweeney's point, we're not getting cooperation that is due, and that's what's slowing things down, in every respect, Mr. Whedon, we have to know right away. Even if it's a matter of emailing us in between the month, or myself, as we've been communicating, and we call an emergency meeting, right? Because this this needs to be solved before we sit again in September. It is not going to, in fact, Labor Day is approaching, I get it, but we still have, 2 more full work days available. And it's funny, Mr. Holloway asked me about press conference. I don't like going in front of anyone's cameras unnecessarily, but if we need to even issue a press release about how we are trying to work with and continue to work with Metro Police and welcome that space, but if nothing else, we're issuing it for the community to understand. And that ties back to Mr. Campbell-Gooch's point around the fact that there are people who, even though they're not in the room, their energy, their blood, their sweat, their tears are in this space, right? The Methodist preacher in me is alive here. There's something that is not okay, because this public servants, right? But are they acting in the best interest of their role? So let me pause there for Ms. Ross and then Dr. Lewis.
I believe now we really do need to do some type of time frame of how we're going to address this issue. The cat's out the bag. It's on media. So we need to determine how we're going to address this, because it needs to be done as soon as possible. I agree with Mr. Cooper in his direction too.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis.
Yeah, and I could not agree more with what Mr. Sweeney was saying. And when something like this happens, I would prefer to have the primary source documents put into a packet with us. I want to see the email. I want to see the date. I want to see what the response was. I want to see what action we're taking on that.
And to Dr. Lewis's point, in that package, we do as much as we need their email responses. We want to see Mr. Ramirez's emails, Mrs. Fisher's, anyone who has communicated with them, so we can understand the tone and tenor by which we are responding. So that if there's a need to say, look, perhaps we use this type of language, so they can impress upon them the urgency as well. But I take that totality of it. Mr. Cooper.
I think Mr. Sweeney's comments are very well taken, and I would suggest that since this board doesn't meet for another month, that this needs immediate attention and should not wait another month, that the board consider charging the executive committee during this next month to meet, to work closely with Mr. Whedon and the staff to take whatever steps are necessary to resolve this.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Sweeney,
So moved.
1 second.
Second.
Ms. Ross, any focused discussion? Dr. Lewis.
I'm totally fine with the executive committee meeting, but if anybody wants the full board to meet, I think that's appropriate as well, to have an emergency meeting.
Okay. Is there? Why?
That was just a comment, not
No,
a motion.
I appreciate it.
I don't know if we have a date yet for September meeting.
We don't. It's at the bottom of the, well, not the bottom, but it's later on here. But we are certainly going to have to move our September meeting because it conflicts with the NACO conference. And my recommendation, at least, was to look at the week before, but perhaps it's, I'm sorry, I can't think of the top of my head, but it's like September 23rd or something like that. But that wouldn't even be soon enough to what we're talking about. We're really talking about at least the second week of September at the very latest, right? So not this next week when we're coming back from Labor Day holiday, but the following week. Because someone give me that Wednesday date by chance. Thank you so much. That would be September 11th. That would allow a short time frame, thank you, Mr. Cooper, for us to receive the information we've asked for, the timeline, back and forth correspondences, and it would also allow time, quite frankly, it would allow us to at least have one more hopeful engagement with Metro Police, to engage Mr. Dickerson as well. Sorry, Siri's got something to say. So, but does September 11th is the time that I'm putting out there, Mr. Sweeney.
So is that with the board or?
That would be a full. I think we are proposing that date for the idea of the full board. I think that was why we were talking about it, Mr. Sweeney.
As a practical matter, if the board meeting gets held that early, we will not have a proposed MOU for the board to consider. It might be I don't disagree with holding a meeting in September 11th. This might be one of those months again where we need 2 meetings.
Twice, yeah.
So meet once on the 11th and then meet at the end of the month as well. And that way, we don't lose the time for the MOU, and yet we can meet here as necessary.
Yep, so, thank you, Mr. Sweeney. So we'd have to either be, because we only have in that month, the 4th, next Wednesday, the 11th, the 18th, and then the 25th that doesn't work due to the NACO conference.
So maybe that next first week of October.
The 18th, is that not a good date? The 18th, September?
Let me offer, if we were to move the meeting to the 18th September, I would still want the executive committee to meet before that date.
Yep.
I would still want expediency on this engagement of Mr. Dickerson and legal department so that, one, it gives a bit more time for us to have a fuller meeting with all those components, but or it's 2 meetings. Mr. Sweeney.
The schedule of our committee was that we were going to meet on the 13th and we were going to make our final recommendations regarding the MOU.
13th, okay.
Okay?
Okay.
I learned today, however, that the MOU draft didn't get sent out to everybody it was supposed to be sent out to.
Okay.
Last month, it went out to individuals, but it didn't go out to any of the organizations that we sent the original rules to.
Okay.
Gotcha. So we're going to have to resend out to the organizations. I don't think we're going to have another public hearing, but we're going to have to send them out to the organizations. Maybe we get all the information that we need so that we can do what we want to do on the 13th, but we might have to have another, maybe short, meeting after the 13th, but before the board meets for final consideration. So we couldn't do that if we have an 18th date. If we do September 18th, we wouldn't be able to do all of that by September 18th because of the need to resend.
Short time, turnaround.
So maybe the 11th and then a meeting the first week of October might be the best way to deal with September matters, essentially having 2 meetings.
2
for what
meetings
we
in the
would do
month of
September.
October. Is what
Yeah,
you-
actually it turns out to 2 in October, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. September 11th being the meeting that would still be for the entire board. And then 1 to 3 weeks later, a week after the NACO conference, October 2nd, being the date of our September board meeting, but really October. That would still mean that we would have our October 23rd. That's our 4th Wednesday of the month. Did everyone follow that? I was trying to...
October 23rd.
Yep, so let me just start. So September 11th being the next time the board would meet, and by then we would have all the things that we've discussed today. And then 3 weeks later on October 2nd would be our full board meeting, where we would take up the review of the final components of the bylaws, the MOU rather, this being put together. And then on October 23rd, that would be our full board meeting. Likely, perhaps shortened in space, but we don't know. However, the September 11th board meeting would have on that agenda one item, right? And so we're receiving the result, the findings of the Metro Legal. We're hearing an update, a very thorough update from our executive director, and any other, information needed. And then as a board, deciding from that information we receive next steps. That's my understanding here. Just want to make sure everybody else here is in agreement. Mr. Cooper?
October 23rd, Mr. Whedon, you identified that as one of the potential dates for the procedural justice and police legitimacy program. Is that going to be, pose a difficulty for you?
That program will probably, it's an 8-hour program, it'll probably be done by 4 o'clock. If we can start the meeting a little bit later, shouldn't be much of a problem.
That will be on the first of 2 days you identified. So is there going to be carryover activities following the meeting on the first day?
Yes, so 23rd and 24th will be 2 separate 8-hour trainings.
Since you will have people from Chicago, will you need to attend to them after the 8-hour session?
I don't think
I'm
so.
just thinking in terms of your availability to come spend 2 to 3 hours with us
I don't
right
think
after
so.
that.
I'll be in communication with them. I think we have a conference call set for next week, sometime next week, and I think that they'll be okay.
So for the October 23rd, thank you for those points, Mr. Cooper. I'd like to keep the start time as is, Mr. Whedon. If you could work out the agenda such that perhaps someone on the staff can just close out so that we can begin on time, just considering the fact that comes and there's a lot more than just us that we have to think about in that space. But thank you for raising that, and thank you, Mr. Campbell-Gooch, for the reminder. We do have a motion on the floor. It does seem, however, who made that original? Mr. Cooper made the original.
Mr. Sweeney made the motion.
Yeah, he seconded. By Mr. Campbell-Gooch, right?
Ms. Ross.
By Ms. Ross, apologies. So, Mr. Sweeney, do you withdraw your original motion?
I don't remember what my original
Your
motion
original
was.
motion.
So if it needs to be withdrawn, I withdraw it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a new motion on the floor for the planned dates of September 11th, October 2nd, and October 23rd is our next board meetings?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Anyone second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Any focused discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, nay. Abstentions? Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you very much. We were in the midst of the executive director's reports, and I know we were given our questions and comments. I just have one more question before we leave here. Mr. Whedon, in the case activity section of your report, the 5 matters that were outside of the April 1st, 2019 timeframe, what next steps or communication what was communicated to those individuals? What did we tell them?
Well, we communicated that our jurisdiction basically started on the 1st of April of this year. And each of those 5 matters had the occurrence date was much earlier than the 1st of April. One was actually in 2007, 2006, so there was sometime earlier than our jurisdiction.
And do they have any recourse at all, or what was? I'm just trying to understand. Did we direct them another way, or did we simply?
We directed them another way. Some of them were more required more information. There were concerns about police investigations, whether the investigations had been going as thorough as they had hoped in identifying suspects involved in certain activities and things of that nature. We gave them guidance and advice about what to do next, but basically let them know that our jurisdiction did not begin until the 1st of April of this year. Therefore, that was outside of the time frame for us to investigate that matter for those matters.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Do you have any? Are you just? It's from an old.
Sorry,
comment.
that's an old.
Okay, no problem. Okay, any additional? Anything else, Mr. Whedon, on the update?
No, that's it.
Okay, we have here in front of us. Just want to go through this. The executive director, the moving expenses. So we've talked about this, but now we have at the top on the top page here is the final, the actual cost. Mr. Whedon, just one thing here is, I believe this has to be from me. You can perhaps CC yourself, but since I have to sign this in the end, I think my understanding is it has to come from the board chair. that we're approving this. Did they communicate something differently?
No, I'll make that correction.
Okay, I just want to make sure you don't get hung up in being reimbursed here.
Okay.
On the second, starting in that third page, you'll see the anticipated costs that were submitted. They were under I spoke with Ms. Hall and also Ms. Lomax O'Donnell to confirm before moving forward that this was under the anticipated costs. So the anticipated costs were around $3,750.89. The actual cost came in at $1,968.37. We have detailed receipts here as well from Mr. Wheaton, and these are all just associated with his move from Chicago, his home in Chicago, down here to his new home in Nashville. Do we have a motion on the floor for the approval of the actual costs for Mr. Wheaton's move down to Nashville? Or do you want a moment to, let me pause. If anyone wants a moment to review, we can certainly take that time. Is there a motion?
So,
I had a question.
of course.
Okay, great. Okay, a question on thank you, Mr. Holloway. Do I have a second? Anyone second? We can go with focused discussion here. Anyone second the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Focused discussion, Dr. Lewis.
When I travel for the state, there's a set per diem for incidentals and meals, and I don't know if that's the case with Metro. And my question is, are we in line with that with this submission?
Yep.
Okay.
So Ms. Hall sent. Actually, we're drastically under it because at first the 39, the 3,000 number you see, that was still within. But then the actual came back at 119. So yeah.
Yeah, just checking about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
she did send that to me. Mm-hmm. Any additional focused questions or discussion here? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Abstentions. The motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Wheaton. If you could just resend this to me, I'll sign it and send it back to you.
Yes.
Process. And if you could also CC me on the communication to Ms. Hall when you submit it, just for records here.
Yes.
When it's sent through. Thank you so much. We have here the board training update in front of us here on this sheet. They've provided a very detailed overview of the sessions that begin next Tuesday, I believe, next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And so it looks like the location is in Madison Precinct. Am I correct about that?
Yes, the location is at Madison Precinct 400 Myatt Drive.
Okay. Would it be possible, could we, and I know you've gotten this, send this and just for everyone's information, send the actual address as well, just so that the day of, some of us don't put the wrong address into our devices before we take off, of course. Hands free, we are here in this state. And so that would be excellent. Any questions or comments about the process here, Mr. Martinez?
I had mentioned to Ms. Fitchard that I'll be missing the first two since I have a vacation that I booked a long time ago. I don't know if she provided any information on how we can make up those sessions or if there was any process about that.
She did not, and I think there's been no indication on how, my understanding is no indication that there would be a method of makeup for that. I know we discussed videotaping and things of that nature, but at this point, there's no method to make up any missed sessions.
Okay.
We can share notes.
So there's no videotape that's planned, no transcript.
Not sure about transcripts, but I know we did request videotaping, and that was not possible.
So is there any planned materials that will be passed out? Do you know anything about the materials that are actually physically?
We don't know about that.
Could we look into that, and if nothing else, we can provide to those that cannot attend whatever materials we are handed during the time period. And just for the board here, if things happen, this is several weeks, it is likely we're not going to have we hope all 11 of us here, but when you cannot be there, please communicate that. I would ask, quite frankly, to Mr. Wheaton as soon as possible. I am myself going to go through my own work calendar and see, and then if possible, I quite frankly, I think the chair needs to be on that email as well for awareness, but at the very least, Mr. Wheaton, communicate to the chair who will be missing. I think we should always have a running tally of who has been able to be present. And we're all going to make the best fervent effort to be present as much as possible. But this is a bulk of time in the evening, and certainly I know that there may be a time someone can come at 6, but they need to leave at 8:15, right? So it will happen. Ms. Ross? Oh, actually, Ms. Marsh.
So I worked with Ms. Fitchard on this particular training as far as trying to get the date situated, and we did try to nail down a makeup training. We were not able to do that. There was an offer that because Metro offered this particular police and citizen training academy more than once, that the person could catch up when the next training rolls around. That was one of the offers. We did inquire about that individual doing some type of training directly with staff at MNPD, at the Metro Police Department, to supplement or fill in what they may have missed. It would be something to the equivalent, so you wouldn't get the exact information, but you'll get something to the equivalent. We did inquire about that. We were not able to get an answer to that. It's a possibility, but it was, like I said, it was more so suggested that the sessions that were missed would be makeup in the following academy, which is I believe they offer it twice a year, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, and so that was the conversation, as well as it was more so a wait and see game to see how many people would miss, and if there we talked about maybe having a miss day at the end of where people who missed a large chunk of the training could come in that one day and try to get something that would be equivalent or some type of supplemental training.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Marsh.
Question.
Very helpful. One moment, Mr. Holloway. Ms. Ross.
Question. I know we have to do a police ride-along, but we schedule that with them. And
Ms. Marsh.
is it possible to ride along with one of the special commission officers that patrol the streets?
And so my understanding is that as it gets closer to that, there will be information and instructions given as it gets closer to that. So there was no detailed discussion. And also, I do want to point out too that there is Metro has a policy about attendance to this training. And so in order to receive a certificate or graduate from this particular type of training, then you're only permitted to miss so many sessions, and I believe it is two, if I'm not mistaken. Two. Okay. So just kind of make you all aware of that.
Yeah, it's very helpful. It's good to know. Mr. Holloway?
So what are you telling me? Each one of us are required to attend these schools?
We are.
Yep.
Yep. Yes, sir. And that's part of, I mean, it's long been part of not just the charter itself, but it's also in our bylaws. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. I cut you off. There was another question.
Nobody is exempt.
No, sir. Not even your chair. No, we take your point. But no, we're all expected to be there. Yeah. And so we'll communicate if we're unable to attend, and then to Mr. Whedon, who will continue to just, if can, take a tally of it. But I do see here that they do roll call, so we'll be a part of that as well. So, thank you. Ms. Marsh, thank you, Ms. Marsh. It's incredibly helpful to consider. So next Tuesday, I will see everyone at the Madison Precinct and bring snacks. So it is your dinner time. Eat before you come. Protein up. It's important. It keeps your mind alert. Anything else on this topic? If not, we'll move to our Bylaws Rules Committee. We have something missing here in the subsection here, because we also need to take up an approval of extending the time for the trainings from 6 months, I think, to the recommendation was for a year. But let me, Mr. Sweeney, if you could guide us through this. I want to be thoughtful of our time too, but yeah.
Absolutely. So there's two documents that you have in front of you. One is a red line document with a bunch of red and blue on it. You really don't need to look at that. The other one is the clean copy of that same document. At the top in red, it says proposed final draft. So what we've done is, this is the end product of what the committee has been working on. We've gone through the drafting after we originally presented a proposal here to the board back in June. We sent it out for public comment to 21 different community organizations. And we had a public forum, and we received written comments on it. We received written comments from, I forget, 5 organizations, I believe. All the comment for,
8 or 7.
Well, 8 or 7 total with oral and written, but I think it was 5 written, but whatever. But then we received the oral comments as well. All the comments were good, they were productive, they were useful, they were things that led to revisions to the draft. And we think that it's a very good, workable draft and practical and would accomplish what we want to. In the process of going through this and considering all those comments, we then went back and looked at the original 3 rules that we had adopted back in February. And we decided that it would be good to incorporate them into this one document as well, so that we'd have everything in one place. And then we were asked to consider a rule on budget and finance, with the responsibility of the director and the director reporting to the board, and so that rule is in there as well. Okay. Also, apropos of our discussions in here, there is a specific rule regarding the director's report to the board on a monthly basis. And I'd like to look at that for a moment, because also based upon today's discussions, I'd like to make one suggestion to revise it. So this is over on page 14, and this is section 11. And the first part of that rule under A says that the same information that's going to be provided, statistical information that's going to be provided in the annual report for the whole year, that we'll get monthly segments of that for each month, so that it's the same reporting information that we would be doing, and it's basically as to our operations. Then in the next section under B, it starts adding additional things that we want to be added in. And before what is currently B, I would add in a new B and then re-letter everything after that. And the new B would state, any impediments, obstructions, or interference staff has experienced in the performance of its work. And that will then make sure that we get a heads up on things that are preventing the staff from doing what it thinks that it should be doing. Okay? With that one revision, I would move that these proposed rules be adopted, and then I'd be glad to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Is there a motion on the floor? No, Mr. Turner. Before
I have one suggestion on page 3, item 6, and I think it's about the 5th line down, making reference to administrative leave. Instead of leave, I think it should be changed to administrative assignment. That would be more in line with what the current practice is at the department now. Most of the officers who are under investigation are placed on administrative assignment rather than administrative leave. Okay.
Mr. Turner, Chief Turner, can I ask, would, I take your point, if someone was put on leave, though, would assignment still cover it? We don't need to say and leave, I guess is my question. Assignment covers all of it?
Yeah, I think assignment would cover it. I mean,
Okay.
if it was on assignment at home, but what they're doing now, they're placing the officers on assignment in a non-law enforcement position,
Okay.
basically answering the phone or doing some administrative work.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Me and Mr. Whedon talked about this before, and I hadn't had a chance to talk to you about this, Mr. Sweeney. But on page 13, number 6, when it talks about the number and percentage of complaints alleged, and then it breaks it down into category, I noticed that we don't mention anything about physical ability or LGBTQ. It just feels like it feels like E needs to be broadened.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying with language?
Yep.
Which one?
So this, is that?
So E where it talks about race and ethnicity discrimination, I feel like it just needs to include what discrimination is.
Okay.
Right,
So-
but it doesn't mention, if it's going to mention race, it needs to mention
Okay.
that.
So would you say race, ethnicity, disability,
Disability status, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression.
Age.
Age. Yeah. I take it from okay. So disability status.
Okay. Yep.
And to that, the gender identity and expression, you heard me on that one. Yeah, that's
National
distinct
origin.
there. National origin.
Okay.
Mr. Cooper?
That was all right.
Let me say to Mr. Sweeney and other members of this committee, this is outstanding work, and so I am happy to second the motion that Mr. Sweeney made to adopt. I would also note that Mr. Sweeney did in boldface ask us to form a close review, and so
Absolutely.
if I could, I'd like to go through some questions and comments.
Absolutely.
I guess let me start on page 3, section A7, and this relates somewhat to the discussion we had earlier in our meeting about the Public Records Act. And Mr. Pinkley, with the statute passed at this past session, any document that we receive that is already confidential will remain confidential. Outside of that, is there any claim we can make to be exempt from the Public Records Act for what is in our investigative files?
The only exemption would be the same exemption that MNPD is kind of using right now to deny us access.
Well, except we're not doing the criminal investigation, and that arises from Rule 16 of the Tennessee Rules of Criminal Procedure.
And under the most recent, there was a Court of Appeals case that limited substantially their understanding of using that criminal process.
Yeah.
So I believe that any documents that we create are available to the public if they want those.
Well, my concern here is that we are stating that our file is confidential, which frankly I think we should keep confidential to the extent we can. I guess my question is, if we receive a public records request and we do not have a good faith argument that the record in the files, let's say, is confidential, then we put ourselves at risk of sanction if we don't disclose that. How would we deal with that under
Well,
this Rule
in
7?
drafting this provision, Mr. Pinkley and I went through it, and he told me that this was a proper statement of the law with regard to what we had and what we can do.
It's going to largely depend on where we get the information from.
Yeah,
So,
I have to say, I question whether we can make a global claim of confidentiality based on current state law.
It may be that we want to approach the legislature, which you know, we may not, but we may, in order to clarify the status. Okay, the problem with it not being confidential and being stated as not being confidential is, as a practical matter, it will impede the work, because that means any statement that we take from anyone, okay, is something that is going to be subject to disclosure while we're in the midst of our investigation. And our investigation could certainly implicate criminal matters, and one of the options that we have at the end of our investigation is to refer it to the Attorney General or to the District Attorney General or to the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I think there is, I'm not acting as a lawyer, I'm not making legal advice, and that's why I asked Mr. Pinkley as to what we could do. But I certainly can see how a court would say, yes, you're under the same protection under Rule 16, because these are the same people that would be involved if OPA was doing the same investigation regarding the same matter, and they would claim the same privilege. And therefore, since we are doing the same function that they do and that they can claim that privilege, and ours could result in a criminal referral, I think that it's entirely appropriate here to state it the way it's stated.
I think that we can certainly state it as aspirational. My concern is, A, that we not convey false expectations to people about confidentiality that we will not be able to deliver, and two, that we not find ourselves taking a position that cannot be defended. And I guess, would we be defended by Metro Legal if we were sued under the Public Records Act? And do we know what position Metro Legal would take with regard to our exemption from the Public Records Act?
I know that Metro Legal does have their own litigation department. I would assume that they would be the ones that would represent us should that come up. I don't know that they have a hardline opinion about that.
And would they defend us? Because if there is not a reasonable legal basis to make a claim, then we could be subject to being required to pay the attorney's fees of the requester, and would not want to put us in the position of having unnecessarily spent public funds by taking such a legal position. So I think we need to know where Metro Legal is going to come down on this. Having said that, again, I'm happy for this to be aspirational, as long as we are realistic about this and do not take a position that's going to get us into legal trouble and also
run contrary to what we have told to people we take statements from.
A couple things. I think from the discussions that we've had with Mr. Dickerson before, where COB intersects with MNPD, he has said, we've got a conflict and we can't wade into that area between the two. And to the extent that this overlaps or interconnects, I'm not sure, how Metro Legal would feel comfortable weighing into that issue. I just say that as a general matter. Number two, I don't know at this point whether there's a clearer definition of the issue that can be arrived at, and maybe this is an issue, if it's otherwise acceptable, to leave it then to be addressed down the road with the recognition that this is something that needs to be attended to. But to leave it as it is until to look at it further along the way, but not to make any definitive change to language or to how we would respond to a request until and unless we get a request.
And I would say that we need to flag this so that if there is a request, that we not simply respond automatically based on this language and deny it, but come back. I would be surprised if respect to our own records that Metro Legal would take the position that what we do is somehow in conflict with the police department, and besides which, if they don't defend us, who is going to defend us? So I'm not sure they have a choice here. But with the understanding that we are going to re-examine this on a case-by-case basis as we receive public record requests, I'm fine, but I think we need that clarification. On page 4, section B4B, talking about the intake investigation SOP shall include at a minimum the following. The director will review each complaint to determine whether the COB has jurisdiction to conduct an investigation. If not, then the director may administratively close the complaint with periodic notice of such closings to the board. Do the rules provide for whether there would be notice to the complainant that their complaint has been closed?
No, but there's SOPs underneath this that will deal with the mechanics of how things get handled. So all of that kind of detail as to who gets notified, when they get notified, what. And so this is more the overview. Okay? But I guess one of the questions is, in the SOP, does the SOP provide for notice when the matters are going to be closed?
Well, I think as a matter of course in our standard operating procedures, we will notify complainants if their matter is administratively closed.
I would urge that we include that in the SOP, and that the complainant does, I think, have a right to know what action is taken.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I believe that is included in the SOP, but I will double check that tomorrow.
Okay. Next, section C1.
Page 5.
No additional weight will be given to statements provided to the COB by any person based on whether that person is a complainant, an accused, or a witness, or whether the person is a law enforcement officer, nor will the director or investigator disregard a witness's statement merely because the witness has some connection to the complainant or accused or because of any criminal history. Is disregard used in this sense to say that it will be given no weight, or that the weight given to it will not be affected by this? In other words, just to say we will not consider this at all, or does
it will not be considered at all?
Okay, as opposed to
weight,
making a determination about the potential relevance of those in terms of the amount of weight to be given.
Right.
Okay.
So status is not something that can be considered.
cannot be considered at all. Okay, so, well, disregard, I take to mean that you would not consider the witness's statement at all.
No, you don't consider the status, no additional weight,
Based on what?
you know.
Well, no, that's
So-
on the first statement. I'm looking at the latter part. Nor will the director or investigator disregard a statement merely because.
Well, hold on for a second. Right. No, disregard is the right word. We're not going to disregard it just because they're connected
Fine.
to somebody.
Then they will not put it aside and
Right.
not regard it at
Right.
all. Doesn't say anything to the weight they might give to it.
Absolutely.
Fine, okay. Last subsection I of that,
Yep.
determination of whether to recommend MNPD policy changes based on the misconduct investigation. Should we also include as an option or refer for additional policy review? Because the investigation, misconduct investigation may not by itself fully flesh out the policy issues. And we may want to ask our policy people to work some more on that.
Right. Well, we have an entirely separate section on policy recommendations. You know, a separate rule on general policy matters.
But should the proposed resolution report consider that as an option, either to recommend policy changes or to ask,
Oh, you mean
yeah,
not only whether we should recommend, but what the recommendation is?
whether to recommend policy changes based on the investigation or to refer, based on the investigation, to refer this for additional policy review.
That doesn't, it can, but that makes it, in a sense, more administratively complicated, because that doesn't have to come to the board in order to kick over to that level. So the board wouldn't have to to put it in here, it makes it sound like the board would have to make that determination in order for it to move into a broader policy consideration. Do you see what I mean?
Well, as long as it's going to get passed along, then I'm not
Yeah.
going to worry about it.
Yeah.
But if you feel like it's covered elsewhere,
I think it's covered elsewhere.
fair enough. On the next page, item 3, and this is relevant to a discussion we had earlier. After a complaint has been filed, no board member shall communicate with the complainant, the accused, or their respective representatives about a complaint or matter under investigation or
I'm
review
sorry,
by the
I'm sorry,
board.
Bob. Which page are you on?
Paragraph 3.
Paragraph 7?
Page 7.
No,
Page seven.
D3.
Page
D3.
3. Okay, yep.
Yeah. Basically, after a complaint has been filed, no board member shall communicate with the complainant, the accused, or their respective representatives about a complaint or matter under investigation.
Yep.
Should we add that if such a communication occurs, that should be brought to the attention of the director? Just as
You mean
Mr.
if somebody
Holloway did.
contacts but there's no communication?
Well, if
Because this says you can't.
if someone has contacted you, let's say you get a letter, then I think it would be appropriate to then bring that letter to the director to say, I have received this, I'm putting you on notice that I have received this. I've taken no further steps. Or likewise, as Mr. Holloway did, this individual buttonholed me, and I'm, Mr. Whedon, giving you this information so that you are fully aware of that.
Well, by your description, at the time when the person got the letter, that wouldn't violate the policy because a complaint hasn't been filed.
Well, let's say after a complaint has been filed, then you get a letter regarding the complaint.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what are you suggesting that it add?
That such communication be brought to the attention of the director.
Okay.
Mr. Tom, let me just interject here because the way that we usually went through this with Mr. Dickerson guiding us through, we usually did it by, the sections, right? In that, Mr. Cooper, I know you have additional points, but I also want to acknowledge if anyone else has anything too, and I want us to be collectively engaged here, although I am appreciative of the conversation here
Certainly.
too.
And let me say, I think the rest of mine are
Yeah.
typos, which I'm
Okay.
happy to pass along.
Okay, is there anything else substantive
Ms.
that
Lewis,
you
you
want to
missed
raise?
that.
up? Yeah.
I object. I was in charge of typos, and so there cannot be any.
All right.
Let me say, I think we can go through this pretty quickly if we want to do this, and perhaps typos is the right word. We could look at section 3D,
B as in boy?
D as in
D?
dog.
Okay.
Page 9.
The board will
Yep.
review such proposed policy advisory reports. Should the subsequent references to COB in there be board?
What page?
Can you tell us again?
Yeah, section 3D.
Yes,
Okay, section
What
3D,
page?
yes.
and that would be page 9.
Page
Top
9.
Page 9.
COB should be board, and then in section E, I believe COB should be board also.
Okay.
Yes,
And you're changing COB in both citations in D, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And then in 4A, would COB be board also?
no.
Well, you're talking about committees.
Yeah, no, hold on a second.
COB and committee goes up to.
Yes,
Okay. Same thing with section 5A and 6A.
yes.
Okay. Anything else, section 7, 8?
Let's see.
6B. Oh, no.
I would say just a style. In 7A, you have speaker sheet without quotes, and then 7D, you have speaker sheets with quotes. I don't know if you want that to be consistent.
I'm sorry, in 7A and B?
Yeah, 7A and D is in dog.
I don't see it.
Both of them refer to
I
speaker
don't see it in
sheets.
B.
Here's A.
Is it-
And then D is
Line
in dog.
5
D?
in each one.
Oh,
Yeah.
D.
Those quotes should go away.
Yeah, this quote should go away.
Now, my question to you is, should there be an apostrophe after S in speakers?
I can go either way on that.
Yeah. We'll put one in
Section 8?
as a plural.
Section 8, no. Section 9, D is in dog.
Hold on a second. I'm sorry, which?
Section 9, D is in dog.
Okay.
Okay.
The second sentence, training courses and trainers providing board members and COB staff shall be listed on the COB website. Feel like there's a word missing there.
Okay.
And trainers providing training.
Training courses and those providing training
To
to,
the board members?
yeah.
Okay.
Reorder. Okay. Section 10?
Section 10 had a question about A10. The number and percentage of complaints resulting in the imposition of non-disciplinary remedial measures implemented directly by the COB.
Right.
Could you describe what a non-disciplinary remedial measure implemented
At
directly
the
by the
moment,
COB
there
would
are
be?
none, but we have the authority to have them. But at the moment, there are none.
Okay.
Section 11?
The only other suggestion I had was in section 12C,
Uh-huh.
talking about budget items exceeding an amount, the director shall bring that matter to the attention of the board at the earliest possible time. I would suggest that perhaps we say to the attention of the chair and the board at the earliest possible time, that the chair can likely get this notice earlier than the full board will.
Okay.
And that's all I've got. And again, excellent work. I really admire what y'all have done here.
That was good work. Thank you.
Thank you for all that. That's helpful. That's good.
Very much. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you. We had a motion on the floor, a motion by Mr. Sweeney to approve, the proposed final draft, but that would need to be with the
Need to be
proposed.
amended.
It need to be amended there.
Okay. Well,
I'll withdraw my motion,
Okay.
and I'll make a new motion,
Sure.
which is to adopt the proposed final draft of the rules with the specific language amendments that were discussed during the process today.
Thank you.
And that would also imply the 3 rules that were adopted on February 13th of 2019 being withdrawn or rescinded, whatever the right word is, or amended so as to become part of this rule document as rules 4, 5, and 6.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. All those focused discussion.
A lot of changes in here.
Yes, sir. We just walked through all of them. Any questions on it, Mr. Holloway?
One thing is, when we make the changes, all the changes we made today, come back with the final process before.
Well, Mr. Holloway, the reason why we just went line by line here, there were no substantive changes other than the ones here. Now, if you disagree, you certainly don't have to vote to approve them. Also, if you want to make a motion here, we do have a motion on the table, though, that we have to move forward with. So this is discussion space. We don't have to have every vote to be unanimous here. But I believe the majority of the board at least feels that they've had an opportunity to listen and to opine as necessary. But any additional comments on that, thoughts?
Let's move forward.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone nay? Abstention? Motion passes. Thank you very much. And we also need to take up the proposed amendment to Article 5
Right.
here
So-
in front of you.
Yes, so the committee has one other proposal, and that's to amend our bylaws that we previously have adopted. And this is amending Article 5, Section 5 with regard to training. The current provision provides that we'll complete our initial training within the first 6 months. This does a couple different things. It's a little more specific as to what the initial training is and describes it here and says we'll complete it within a year. And it also has that provision in there as available. And that's intentional. And that's because of the issue with negotiating or attempting to negotiate with the police department as far as the Citizens Training Academy and being done, and the inability to obtain some flexibility as far as videotaping or alternate or whatever. So, it's if there's any issue that gets raised that, because somebody's missed 3 meetings, they haven't completed their initial training because the police department says you can only miss 2, and otherwise, this is intended to address that type of issue. Because I believe that, and this is part of the MOU too to be negotiated, is that we need to come to an understanding or agreement with the police department that the training that they're providing to us is different from the civilian police academy that they offer to the general public, where they can set whatever kind of requirements they want and can set whatever kind of timetable they want and whatever rules for completion. But here, as 2 different metro agencies, each with their own authority, there has to be a way to find out how to find that sweet spot of doing things together. And maybe it's a budget issue at some point, that they have to get more money or get some portion of our budget in order to train us, whatever. But there has to be a way to find the sweet spot. And so this provision is to amend the bylaws that we can't be in compliance with in order to make sure that we're compliant, we're still doing what the charter requires us to do.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Dr. Lewis?
I just wanted to go on the record as saying that I think that MMPD has been pretty flexible with us in that they have established an entire different training program specific to this board. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Ms.
I
Ross?
don't really think so because we're going under the Community Police Training Academy, Citizen Police Training Academy, so they haven't did anything specific for us, I believe.
They've modified it and they're offering this special session just for us.
No, ma'am.
This is not with the Citizens Police. It's just going to be us.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that was not my understanding.
Yeah, this is just for us. This is
Okay.
special.
Well, and let me just,
I don't think
I'm sorry, let me just say, they did modify the curriculum, so it has, they did modify that. And it's my understanding that there was an invitation that went out for other individuals to join this training, such as the Metro City Council and certain other organizations or groups. So it may not just be us. And then I'm going to make one other point. I do want to apologize. I do have to leave. I have to leave. And so I'm going to ask that Mr. Campbell Gooch can take on can speak about the nominating committee in my absence, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Ms. Marsh. Mr. Campbell Gooch?
I have one question, Ms. Marshall, before you left, really quickly. Do you know where we can see a list of the other community organizations that were invited? And are we talking about this particular session?
So, yes, Ms. Fitchard has knowledge of that list, and I don't know if we can get it sent by email, but what it was I believe it was an email that either went out from Metro or maybe in the newsletter, inviting a certain organization. I don't remember who all was in that invite, but we can ask Mr. Wheaton to see if we can get that.
Let me see if I can
It's
get in contact.
it's on Facebook and everything else where you can apply to participate in this training. I saw it myself.
That's online.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Thank you, Ms. Marsh, as well. With that, is there a motion for the proposed amendment to the COB bylaws, Article 5?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Cooper. Ms. Ross, thank you. Any focused discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you very much to the Bylaws and Rules Committee. Next up is our nominating committee. Mr. Campbell Gooch.
Yeah, so we came up with a process, and Ms. Lewis, you can kind of fill in wherever I mess up or slip up. So we came up with the best process of just voting paper ballot anonymously. And so we wanted to make sure that each one of the executive positions had multiple people who were nominated. So we kind of took the nominations from the people who did decide to nominate people on the board. We kind of took those and even built out and had a conversation on who we felt would be best suited for each position in the executive committee. So we're going to have those paper ballots come around. Mr. Wheaton, do you have them?
Thank you very much.
Yep, so you just circle the person who you want to serve.
Here you go.
While we're waiting, we'll give you a moment here. Do we have anyone signed up for, I'm sorry, I turn my back here, of the community forum portion? Do we have anyone who would like to speak? I think we have. Remember. Okay, because if we don't, Mr. Kimball, were you done? Okay. Because if not, I just want to propose a way to do this. I think it's a better execution of this for next month. We've been talking about the list of organizations. I think we need to send out, it'd be great if we could send out an invitation of sorts, post it on our Facebook page, to share with the community that we would welcome their comments. And along those same lines, share the details of it. We said that we were allotting 3 minutes each speaker, that the sign-up sheet would be available prior to, I think the agreement was 2 people could sign up before the day of the week, before the next meeting, but then 3 people could sign up the day of the actual meeting, and we would have that out 30 minutes before the prior start. I'll type that out myself. However, we will need the help, Mr. Whedon, of you yourself. I know you're writing right now, so not to interrupt your count, to ensure that this goes out to the community, because we know full well. I mean, I've had members of the community come up to me at grocery stores and hospitals, etc., with thoughts, and we want to provide that open space for that. Is that okay with the board? It's not very much different from what we've already agreed to, quite frankly, but it will allow us to ensure that they have an open space for that communication. So we'll work with team there. And just a reminder here, and we'll send out an email for all of this, but we have agreed that we will meet in 2 weeks on September 11th at 4 p.m. And that will be a very targeted discussion, followed by 3 weeks from that on October 2nd, and then which will be a full board meeting, and then October 23rd as well. Mr. Holloway, if you could plan for an overview of that September meeting that you will be participating in for October 2nd, that would be great. We don't need a full report, but remember you said you have a September fines and fees.
Well, I can't exactly say I'll be prepared for October 7th because I don't know what their schedule is on October 7th.
Sure. Okay. No, that's totally fine. And if not, we'll just still have you on the agenda, but if there's nothing to report at the time, that's totally fine too. Thank you. And the next meeting also, one thing we didn't get to, and I got the nod from Mr. Pinckney here, is that, apologies, the mediation presentation that you were planning to share, we'll just plan for that October 2nd meeting when we have a full meeting. So, Mr. Pinckney.
And if anyone in their review of the mediation has any kind of comments, questions, anything, feel free to email me and I can address those and have that ready to go for the next meeting.
Do we have these documents in electronic form?
We do have some.
That'd be great.
Great for me too.
Let's not be curious that we're missing.
That's all right.
I remember it being.
Detail's important, right?
I have somewhere.
Any new business or announcements? Just use this. Mr. Sweeney?
Yeah, I guess one thing that maybe we should put on our agenda coming up for that October 2nd meeting is under Article 2, Section 5 of the bylaws. We need to go through that self-selection process of ours as to who will be on the board and who will transition off. And from my reading of the bylaws again and going back and looking at the charter provision, there's a lot that's uncertain as far as what the council does with that information. So it probably would be good for the executive committee to open up some discussions maybe with the vice mayor as to, you know, what we're doing and further service for those people who rotate off, or how the selection process will continue for new folks if there's people who don't want to continue to serve.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. So, well, time point. We'll add Mr. Pinkton.
And this is just something to consider for the future. The November board meeting would be the day before Thanksgiving, and the December board meeting will be on Christmas Day, so we would probably need to change that.
No, we'll be here. I wouldn't eat with anyone else.
Find your lack of dedication.
Mr. Pinkton. Good point, though. We'll look at our calendars. Thank you. Mr. Whedon, you have the floor.
We are done. Would you like a number count or just the person receiving the most vote in each category?
I don't know how the board could nominate candidates. Yeah, I think it's fine.
Position of chair, the votes go to current chair Davis. Position of first vice goes to Mr. Board Member Martinez. Second vice goes to Board Member Cooper. And secretary goes to Board Member Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Whedon. Because we have two members of the board not present, would it be possible, I know there's lots of updates and information we're asking, but it would be helpful to have the listing of the executive committee sent out to the board so that everyone is on the same accord. That'd be really helpful for anyone. I wouldn't want Ms. Marsh and or Dr. Hildreth, but just for all of us to be aware. In the timing and scheme of things with what would be a 50% new executive committee, certainly would need to meet likely before the next board meeting. It doesn't need to be 2.5 hours long, probably not even a full hour, but there are some good points that have been made even in this last 10 minutes here that the executive committee needs to act on and be prepared to engage the board on. And so I'll work through Mr. Whedon here. We usually do a doodle poll to make sure that it's convenient for everyone, a good timing and space, and that works for everyone as well. Thank you to the nominating committee as well for this work, again, off the time clock to get us ready and prepared, and to all of you as well that agreed to be nominated and put up on the ballot as well. Any additional comments or thoughts on this, Mr. Whedon? I just want to make sure we weren't cutting you off before you had something else to say.
No, nothing else. Just double looking at those numbers. Nothing else. No.
Okay. Is there something we need to hold on?
Yeah, 1 second. Let me check this email.
Okay, we'll give you a moment here. Mr. Holloway.
My comment is about the process.
Yes, sir.
I've never in my life seen an election where a person can run for more than one position at the same time.
Yes, that's actually that. I've seen it quite frequently, actually.
Yeah. If I could say, we received very few nominations. How many people responded from the board?
Three people responded.
3 people responded from the board. So we had a lot of people that were just running. I mean, that there was nothing but just one person, and I'm a very big fan of being like sharing the workload as much as possible. And so we just kind of added names. That's why my name was all over it, because I just volunteered when there was no one else, no one else willing to be there.
Mr. Cameron Gooch.
I've never seen nothing like that before. Putting proper rules and order. I don't know if it's legal or not.
Yeah, I did want to bring up a point is, and I guess it was unforeseen by the nominating committee, but I wasn't expecting people not to be here voting. So I don't know.
Not to be here voting?
Yeah, like Phyllis isn't here, Danita stepped out, so neither one of them got a chance to vote at all.
Didn't make a difference.
So I don't think it does, but I just
I take your
it
point.
was unforeseen.
However, they did make a conscious decision
Right.
not to be
here.
present.
Right,
yeah,
right,
because
sure.
I do take your point.
I think that situation is addressed in the bylaws, as I recall.
It is. No, I agree.
We had an argument about it a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Mr. Whedon, do you need additional time?
No, just to address the question that was raised about other people and entities invited to the Citizens Police Academy.
Oh, wait, before that, though, it sounded like, I just want to be clear, it sounded like there might have been some count. There was no count?
No.
Okay, sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Okay, sorry. Go right ahead.
Citizens Police Academy, other people that were invited, received an email that was forwarded from the Assistant Director Fisher. Looks like city council members were invited. Mayor's office staff was invited. The district attorney's office was invited. Judges, general session, judges, GCS, administrative assistants, department heads, metro clerk, metro council staff. Is that the sheriff's? Public defender staff, trial court judges, and DCSO administrative staff, it looks like. Quite a few entities were invited.
And the community district council members invited their neighborhoods to participate also. That's how I saw it.
That's what you saw online, is what you're saying.
The thing online, that they're having an additional citizens one that's going to be on Thursdays. At the same time, ours is on Tuesdays.
Okay.
Any additional questions or comments, new business or announcements? Congratulations to those new members of the executive committee and those reelected as well. Mr. Whedon, I just want to reemphasize before we close here, I know we are expecting the very least by the end of tomorrow several, maybe perhaps one big email, but communication quickly to the effect of the email and communication to MMPD, that communication that was sent back from our staff as well, timeline as well. If I'm missing anything, someone please add in here. I just want to make sure we're very clear there.
Mr. Binkley's conversation with Metro Legal about the analysis.
Okay, thank you. That'd be very helpful. Thank you. With that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Point of order. Is there anybody who wanted to speak?
Oh, I believe I turned around, didn't get confirmation from my staff. Then we had it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just
No
missed
problem. No, thank you. I appreciate that. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Anyone second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Nay. Abstentions. The motion passes. We are adjourned at 6:24. Thank you, everyone. See you on September 11th.
Mr. Holloway?
We already did.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.org.